I wasn't supposed to be in that hallway. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Even now, even sitting here at this hour, when the whole building is quiet, and the city outside sounds like it's finally sleeping. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had gone to find Marcus, my old friend Marcus, who was supposed to give the toast, and somebody told me he was down in the east corridor near the bridal suite, and I remember thinking it was a strange place for him to be. Marcus, who always found a way to put himself near the bar. But I went anyway, down past the floral arrangements, past the caterers moving with their trays, past all of it, into that long stretch of hallway that was quieter than the rest of the hotel, where the carpet was a deep burgundy, and the lights were just a little lower than everywhere else. I remember the way my own footsteps sounded there. Slower, like even my body knew to be careful. I heard his voice before I saw him. Devon, my daughter's soon-to-be husband, Devon Arsino, who I had liked, who I had trusted, who had sat at my dinner table and shaken my hand and looked me in the eye the way men look at each other when they are being honest, or when they want you to think they are. I heard his voice, and there was something in the pitch of it, something loose and easy and wrong. That is the only word I have for it now, looking back. Wrong. Like hearing a song you know, but in the wrong key, just off enough to make you stop walking. I stopped walking. He was around the corner, maybe 15 feet away, talking to someone I didn't know. A man I had never seen before, though I would learn later his name was Trent, a friend from before Devon and I had ever met. One of those friends a man keeps in a separate box from the rest of his life. Devon was laughing, low and easy, and I stood there in that burgundy hallway with the catering staff moving somewhere behind me and the music from the ballroom drifting faintly through the walls. And I listened, and the world I had been living in for the past 3 years came apart like something wet. He said, and I remember every word. I have turned them over in my mind so many times, they're smooth now. Smooth, the way a stone gets smooth, when the river has worked on it long enough. He said, 3 hours, Trent. 3 hours, and everything that old man has built becomes accessible to me. The villa down in Miami, the penthouse on the Upper East Side, the boat. 3 hours. And he laughed again. And Trent said something I couldn't quite catch, a murmur, maybe a question about timing, about how. And Devon said, I've already talked to the lawyer. The prenup Vanessa signed protects her assets, not his. Anything titled in his name that we can get him to co-sign or transfer in the next 18 months. Anything we can get him to gift or move into a joint account. It's done. He's old. He trusts me. He already trusts me. It's done. I stood in that hallway. I did not move. There was a moment, and I cannot explain it properly, cannot find the language that would make another person feel what it actually was. There was a moment where my whole body went silent, not numb, silent, like every nerve and every muscle and every old protest in my knees and my lower back just stopped, just went quiet, the way a room goes quiet after a loud sound. My heart was doing something strange, not racing, just present, very loud in my own ears. And somewhere behind me, a cater waiter said, "Excuse me, sir," because I had stopped in the middle of the hallway and he needed to pass. And I moved to the side, without thinking, without turning around. My eyes fixed on nothing, on the burgundy carpet, on the small circular pattern in it that I was staring at without seeing. 3 hours. Everything I had. Everything I had built over 52 years of working and failing and working again and losing and starting over and building. My hands had made that. Not inherited, not fallen into, built. The villa in Miami that I had bought with the money from selling my first company, that I had renovated slowly over 7 years, that I knew room by room, the way you know your own body. The penthouse that I had moved into after Eleanor passed, because I couldn't stay in the house we'd shared, because every room in that house was the wrong temperature without her in it. The boat I had bought because Eleanor had always wanted one, and I had always said soon, when things slow down, soon. And then she was gone, and I bought it and named it after her, and took it out on the water, alone sometimes, and sat there feeling both closer to her and further from her than I had ever felt anywhere on land. Devon knew all of this. Of course he knew. I had told him. I had shown him proudly, stupidly, the way old men show young men the things they have built, because they want someone to appreciate the weight of it, because their children already know and have stopped being amazed, and there is something in a man that never stops wanting to be amazed at. 3 hours. I turned around and walked back toward the ballroom. And I will tell you this right now, because it is the truth, and I have nothing left to protect. I was not sad when I walked back. I was not trembling. I was not the kind of man who weeps at betrayal, though I have wept at other things, at smaller things somehow, at things that had no reason to break me the way they did. I walked back through that hotel corridor and past the floral arrangements and past the bar where I found Marcus talking to a woman he'd just met, and I said, "Marcus, I need you to do something for me right now, tonight, without asking me why." And he looked at me. Marcus has known me since 1974. He looked at my face for about 3 seconds, and he said, "All right, James," just like that. No questions. I told him what I needed. And then I went back to the ballroom, and I shook hands, and I smiled, and I danced one slow dance with my daughter Vanessa, who was beautiful that night in a way that made something in my chest hurt. And I looked at Devon Arsenault across the room, and I smiled at him too, and he smiled back. And in 3 hours, he was my son-in-law, and he had absolutely no idea what was already done. That is the story. That is the short version. The version I could tell you in 5 minutes if that was all there was to it. But there is the rest of it. The rest of it, which is the thing that has kept me awake at this hour for going on 11 years. The rest of it, which is not about Devon Arsenault at all, or not mostly. The rest of it, which is about my daughter and what I chose and what it cost us both. That is the part that follows me, not what he tried to do to me, what I did afterward, what I didn't say, what I protected and what I let go unprotected, without even understanding that was what I was doing. I should go back further. It helps me to go back further, though I'm not sure it helps anyone else. And at this hour, there isn't anyone else to help anyway. My father's name was Calvin Elias Whitfield, and he built things with his hands his whole life, and died having built nothing that lasted. He built other men's houses. He built other men's porches. He poured concrete for other men's driveways. He was good at it. He was respected for it. But there's a difference between being respected for what your hands can do and owning the thing your hands made. And my father spent his life on the wrong side of that difference. And I watched it and said to myself, very young, maybe 9 or 10 years old, standing in the kitchen watching him eat his dinner in his work clothes because he was too tired to change, I said to myself, quietly, in the way children make promises to themselves, not me. I don't say that as criticism of him. I didn't understand then what the world had done to his options, what the world had kept closed in front of him. I understand it now. But understanding it now doesn't change what that boy in the kitchen decided, or the shape that decision made of his life. I became a man who held on, who built and held on, who made sure everything he built had his name on it, legally, properly, documented and bound, because I had watched what happened when things weren't, because I had watched my father work for 40 years and leave behind a truck that didn't run and a 2-room house that technically belonged to someone else. So when Devon said it's done, what he didn't know, what he could not have known, because he was, at the end of it, not a very imaginative man, was who he was talking about. He thought he knew. He'd sat at my table. He'd heard my stories. He thought he had mapped me out well enough. But he had mapped the surface of me. He had mapped the gracious host, the generous future father-in-law, the proud old man, who liked to talk about what he'd built. He had not mapped the boy in the kitchen. He had not mapped the 50 years of holding on. Marcus, that night, made 3 phone calls. My attorney, Gerald Finch, was the first. Gerald was not happy about being called at 9 in the evening on the night of my daughter's wedding, but he was professional, and he was brilliant, and he understood, within about 90 seconds of me explaining what I had heard, exactly what needed to happen. I had given him power of attorney in certain matters years before, after a health scare that turned out to be nothing but which had frightened me into being sensible. He used it. The Miami villa was placed in an irrevocable trust before midnight, managed by a third party I had already designated. Vanessa was a beneficiary, not Devon, not her husband, her. The penthouse on the Upper East Side was transferred to my LLC, restructured and reclassified, with a board I controlled. The boat, Eleanor, was the easiest because I had never put it in my personal name anyway. Gerald reminded me of that almost apologetically, as if he thought I'd forgotten. And I said, "No, Gerald, I never forgot." And there was a pause on the phone that said something about how much he'd always liked working for me, without either of us having to say it. I did all of this at a table in the hotel's business center while my daughter danced with her new husband 40 feet away. I could hear the music. I remember the specific song that was playing when Gerald confirmed the trust was lodged. Something slow, something from the 80s that Eleanor had loved. I want to say I felt something righteous sitting there. I want to tell you it felt like justice, clean and cold and precise the way justice is supposed to feel in the stories. But the truth is, I felt something more like exhaustion, and something that was not quite grief, but was in the same family as grief. The way you feel when you find out something that explains everything, all the small things that never sat quite right, all the moments you dismissed as your own paranoia, and you realize your paranoia was correct, and there is no comfort in being correct about that. I went back to the reception. I danced with my daughter. She said, "Daddy, I'm happy." And she looked it, she genuinely looked it. And I held her and said, "I know you are, baby." And that was the truest thing I said all night. Because she was happy. That was the complication I had not fully thought through. That was the thing that sat down on my chest in the months that followed and did not get up. Vanessa was happy. She loved him. Maybe not the him that existed. Not fully. Not the Devon who had laughed in that hallway. but the Devon she experienced, the Devon she had chosen and been chosen by. She loved that man. And I had spent one evening in a business center quietly dismantling everything that man had been planning, and I had done it without telling her, without asking her, without letting her know what I had heard or what it meant or what kind of man was sleeping next to her now. I told myself I did it to protect her. I tell myself a lot of things. The first cracks came about 8 months into the marriage. Devon started asking questions about the villa. Casual at first, the way someone tests ice before stepping on it. He mentioned that it might make sense to put it in both their names, for estate purposes, for tax purposes. He had some idea about refinancing and a rental income stream that required something. He always had a reason. He was good at having reasons. I said the villa is in a trust, Devon. Has been for years. But I appreciate you thinking about it. And I watched his face. Just for a second. Just a flinch. A small recalibration behind his eyes. And then it was gone. And he was nodding and saying, of course, that makes sense. He came back to it 3 more times over the next year. Different angles, different reasons. The penthouse, twice. The boat, once, very carefully. Each time I said something quiet and unmovable and watched that small recalibration happen behind his eyes. I never told Vanessa. That is the part I sit with now. That is the stone I turn over in the dark. I never told her. I told myself I was protecting her. I told myself it would devastate her to know. I told myself she wouldn't believe me, that she would see it as her old father not trusting her choice, not respecting her enough to let her make her own mistakes. I had a whole architecture of reasons, very solid, very well built, the kind of reasons a man builds when he doesn't want to look at the thing underneath them. The thing underneath them was simpler. I didn't want to be the one who broke it. I didn't want to stand in front of my daughter and say the man you married planned to steal from me before the ink was dry on your license. I didn't want to see her face do what faces do when they receive information like that. I didn't want to navigate what came after. I built things, protected things, moved things quietly in the dark, and then I put my tool down and stepped back and decided the rest was not my problem. And I have lived with that decision ever since. Eleanor would have told her. I know that. I know it the way I know things I can't prove. The way you know certain truths about people who are gone. Truths that live in your understanding of them rather than in anything they ever said to you directly. Eleanor would have sat Vanessa down. She would have found a way to say the hard thing gently, the way she always found a way, the way she could take something terrible and put it in her hands and offer it to you like something she'd found on a walk, something worth looking at. She would have known that her daughter was strong enough to hear it, and she would have trusted that strength, and she would have been right. I didn't do that. I gave Vanessa the villa and the penthouse and the boat, safely, legally, fully hers, regardless of what happened with her marriage, and I withheld the information that would have let her make her own choice about that marriage. I protected her inheritance. I did not protect her. There is a difference. It took me a long time to see it clearly. Years. The marriage lasted 4 years, ultimately. It ended the way bad marriages end when neither the truth nor a lie has been told properly. Not in a dramatic collapse, not in the kind of scene that would at least give you a clear memory to point to, but slowly, like air going out of something. Devon became distant, then cold, then absent, even when he was in the room. Vanessa became careful, then quiet, then sad in the specific way women become sad when they are deciding something they don't want to decide. I watched it from a distance, from my phone calls on Sundays, from holidays where everyone was very polite. I watched it and I said nothing. When she told me it was over, she called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and I remember I was on the boat. I remember the water was very still, and the light was that particular late afternoon gold that the Florida water gets in October. And she said, "Daddy, Devon and I are separating," in a voice that was controlled and tired, and so adult it made me remember suddenly how young she'd been when she was born, how small, how completely she'd fitted in my arms. And I said, "I'm sorry, baby." And I meant it. I meant all of it. I meant the marriage ending and everything before it and everything I hadn't done or said. She said, "Did you know something?" And I paused. She said, "Daddy, did you know something about Devon? Something you didn't tell me?" I want to be precise about what happened in that pause because I have examined it so many times. It lasted maybe 4 seconds. 4 seconds on the water with the light going gold and my daughter's voice waiting on the other end of the line. And in those 4 seconds, I made a choice that I knew was a choice, not something that happened to me, not a misunderstanding or a failure of communication. A choice. I said, "I always had some concerns, baby, but they were just feelings, nothing I could point to." That is what I said. Not a lie, exactly. The way a certain kind of person constructs not lies, concerns, feelings. Nothing concrete. Nothing that accused me of what I had done and what I had not done. Nothing that said I stood in a hallway 3 hours before your wedding and heard everything and chose to let you walk down the aisle and chose not to tell you and have been carrying this for 4 years while you built a life with that man. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Okay," and we talked about the logistics of it, the apartment, her plans, and then we said goodbye. And I sat on that boat in the October light for a long time. The water was very still. Eleanor used to say, "Still water is the ocean thinking." I don't know if that's true, but I sat there a long time. Vanessa is 51 now. Remarkable, isn't it? My daughter is 51 years old, and I'm 83, and time is such an extraordinary and indifferent thing. She remarried, eventually a good man, a pediatric surgeon named Robert, who I like immensely because he asks questions and listens to the answers and doesn't perform either interest or indifference. They have a good life. She seems not happy exactly, settled, content, which is sometimes better than happy, which lasts longer, which is a different kind of thing. I love Robert. I'm grateful for Robert. But there is always the but for an old man sitting up at night. But there are still moments, even now, when she and I are on the phone or sitting at the same table at Christmas, when something passes across her face, some small shadow, some question she's decided not to ask. And I know the way I know things about people I have studied for decades. She still doesn't know the full story, and she half knows she doesn't know it. And she has decided somewhere along the way to leave that half knowledge alone. She has made her peace with a story that has a gap in it, a gap her father put there, a gap her father has never filled. I wonder sometimes what it costs her to leave it alone, if it costs her anything at all, if perhaps she has genuinely moved past it in ways I haven't allowed myself to, because the one holding a secret is always, in my experience, more burdened by it than the one who simply knows something is missing. Devon Arsenault. I'll tell you something almost funny. almost. The kind of funny that isn't. He tried to sue me. After the divorce, after he'd figured out that all of it, the villa, the penthouse, the boat, was structured in ways he had never been close to touching, he went to a lawyer and tried to file some kind of claim that the trust had been established in anticipation of the marriage in a way that constituted fraudulent concealment of assets during the marriage negotiations. Something like that. Something that made Gerald laugh on the phone, a short, sharp laugh, and say, "James, this is embarrassing for him." It went nowhere. Of course it went nowhere. It was built to go nowhere. That was the whole point of it. I felt nothing when Gerald told me. Not satisfaction, not contempt. Nothing, really. Or if something, then something like the feeling you get when you find an old receipt from a store that doesn't exist anymore. Something from a story that's already over. What I felt was the thing I had been not feeling for 4 years, which was that I had not been honest with my daughter, that I had protected her in the way that was easiest for me, which is often not the same as the way that is best for her, that I had made a decision, my decision, about my things, about my life, and executed it perfectly and coldly and without a single mistake. And the price of that precision had been paid not by Devon Arsenault, but by Vanessa, by our relationship, by something between us that used to be without distance and afterward had the faintest distance in it, the thinnest film of something barely visible, barely there, but there. I know it's there because of the way she hugs me now versus the way she used to. That sounds small. I know it sounds small. An old man noticing a difference in the way his daughter hugs him. But I have had a long time to sit with small things, and I know the difference between a thing that is small and a thing that presents as small. When Vanessa was young, she hugged me the way children hug, entirely, all of herself at once, no reservation anywhere. And then she grew up, and the hugs became appropriate, became adult, which is normal, which is the way of things. But there was a further change, later, after everything, and it is not dramatic enough to describe, really. But I feel it. I have felt it for 11 years. I wonder what she would say if I told her all of it. Not the sanitized version, not "I had concerns, baby," but the actual version, the hallway, the conversation, the business center, Gerald, the trust before midnight, all of it. I wonder if it would close the distance or widen it. Wonder if she would be grateful that I protected the assets, or angry that I didn't protect her differently, or some combination of both that would be too complicated for a Sunday phone call and too heavy for a Christmas table. I wonder if at 51 she wants to know. I wonder if at 83 I am still, in my deepest honesty, more afraid of what she'd think of me than I am interested in her having the truth. That thought is not comfortable. I have had it anyway. There is something about being old that strips you of the ability to be comfortable with your own evasions. When you're young, you can look away from yourself. When you're middle-aged, there is still enough noise in your life, enough motion, enough immediate demand to fill the space where self-knowledge would otherwise grow. But when you are old and it is late at night and the building is quiet, there is no noise, there is no motion, there is just the chair and the window and the thing you have been carrying. I think about Eleanor. I think about Eleanor at this hour more than at any other, which is saying something, because I think about Eleanor at most hours. She has been gone for 23 years, and I think about her every day in the same way I breathe, without deciding to, without stopping. She would be 81. I try to imagine what 81 would have looked like on her, what it would have done to her face and her voice, and I can get close, but I can't get all the way there. My imagination has her in her 50s, her 60s at the furthest, the last years I have of her to work from. Past 60, she becomes theoretical. She would have hated what I did. Not the trust, not Gerald, not the legal architecture of it. She would have understood why I built it, and she would have been glad I did. What she would have hated was the silence, the years of it, the way I made myself Vanessa's protector without being honest about what I was protecting her from. She would have looked at me and said something quiet and devastating, and exactly right the way she always did, the way she had been doing for 31 years before she was taken, and I would have looked at the floor the way I always looked at the floor when Eleanor was right, and she would have waited patiently until I looked back up. She would have waited as long as it took. That was one of her gifts. She was a patient woman in a way that never felt passive. Her patience was active, present, a thing you could feel in the room. It did not let you off the hook. It just waited for you to step back onto it voluntarily, which is harder than being forced and more effective. I miss her patience. I miss everything about her, but I miss that specifically right now, at this hour, in this chair. We met in 1971. She was studying to be a nurse. I was working 2 jobs and taking night classes because I had decided, that boy in the kitchen, that the thing was education. That education was the tool. We met at a party neither of us particularly wanted to be at, which is how I have always thought of as a story worth telling. Neither of us wanted to be there, but we both went, and the rest followed from that. 52 years would have followed from that, more than half a century, if she had stayed. But she had 29 years instead, and then the diagnosis, and then 2 years of fighting it the way Eleanor fought everything, quietly and completely, and then nothing. I bought the boat after. I took it out alone the first time, and I said her name on the water. Just her name. Just Eleanor. Out loud. Not to God particularly. Not to any specific direction. Just into the air above the water. And I felt, not comfort exactly, but something. The acknowledgement of something. That she had been here and was not here, and that those were 2 different states, and that both were true simultaneously and would be forever. That I carried both of them. That I was supposed to. The boat helped. I don't know why. It still helps. In a different way. In the way that the things that helped us once continue to help us, even when the original reason is no longer current. The way a habit of the heart works. I go out on Eleanor when I can. I sit on the water, and the world is smaller out there, and my problems are more accurately sized. I think about Devon Arsenault out there sometimes. Less now than before. But I think about him. I think about how easy it was to be fooled by him, and how that embarrassed me at first, privately, in the part of me that had always prided itself on reading people. I had read the wrong things in Devon. I had read his manner, his ease, the way he handled himself in a room, and I had translated those things into character because I wanted my daughter to have chosen well. I wanted her to have chosen a man worth choosing. And so I weighted the evidence toward that conclusion, and I called it trust. Afterward, I went back through the years with him, and I could see the seams I'd missed, small moments, small inconsistencies. A question he'd asked once about how the Miami property was titled that I'd thought was just him being thoughtfully engaged. a comment he'd made about estate planning that I'd found touching at the time, the way he'd listened when I talked about the boat's original cost. I had given him so much information, freely, proudly. I had been, in my pride, almost cooperative with my own robbery. That is a humbling thing to understand about yourself. When you reach a certain age, you believe you have accumulated enough life to read it clearly. You believe your mistakes are behind you, the instructive kind, the ones that change your behavior. And then something happens to show you that you can make a completely new kind of mistake, something you hadn't thought to guard against because it wore such a different costume than the mistakes you had known. I never thought a man would try to rob me through my love for my daughter. I should have. The world is full of such men. Eleanor might have seen it sooner. But Eleanor was gone, and I was an old man who liked being trusted, and I had given Devon exactly the view of me that he needed to do what he intended to do. He just didn't know who had built everything he was looking at. He didn't know the hands that made it. He didn't know what it meant to me that my name was on all of it, what it cost, what shaped me into the kind of man who makes sure his name is on all of it. He found out. Not all at once. He found out the way you find out when everything you expected fails to materialize. One lock that won't open, then another, then another. He found out over 18 months of small failures, each one politely explained to him, each one a wall he hadn't seen. By the end, he must have known something had happened, must have been able to feel the shape of what had been done, though I doubt he ever understood exactly when or how precisely. I was never unkind to him. I was never cold, never gave him any surface to push against. I just stood where I stood, and everything he reached for was not there. There is something in that I am not proud of either. The pleasure of it, those 18 months, the quiet pleasure of watching a man strain against a door that has already been locked, that was locked before he even approached it, that was locked while he was still dancing at his wedding. I am not proud of that pleasure, but I won't pretend I didn't feel it, because I did. It was the pleasure of my father's son having built something no one could take, which was the whole original project, which had just found a new and specific test. I passed the test. I felt the passing of it. But there's a difference between passing a test and being at peace. I passed the test. I was not at peace. Vanessa was in a failing marriage that she didn't fully understand the architecture of because I hadn't told her. She was spending her 30s in a house with a man who had tried to rob her father before. The wedding flowers died, and she didn't know that. And the reason she didn't know, it was me. I have turned that over so many times. I have asked myself, honestly, sitting here, sitting on the boat, sitting at the table at 2 in the morning, would it have changed anything if I had told her? Would she have believed me? Would she have left him sooner, saved herself those years? Or would she have stayed, and the knowledge would have poisoned every day of the marriage differently? Not the slow, quiet poison of a man's true nature emerging over time, but the sharp, continuous poison of knowing, of looking at him across a dinner table, knowing, of lying next to him knowing, of introducing him to her friends, knowing. I don't have an answer. I have only the question. The question is permanent. It will not resolve before I am done, and I have made a certain peace with that, or I am working on it, which is the closest thing to peace available to me on this particular matter. There are other things I carry, smaller, though I'm not sure size is the right measure. Size matters less than duration, I think. A small thing carried for long enough grows heavy in its own way. My son, Nathan, older than Vanessa by 4 years. We have a different problem, Nathan and I, one that isn't his fault and isn't mine exactly, which makes it harder in some ways than the problems that are someone's fault. We are simply different kinds of men. He is a gentle man, a careful man, a man who teaches literature at a university and thinks about things slowly and deeply, and does not enjoy conflict, and does not like what he calls my way of operating in the world, meaning my precision, my control, my habit of solving problems before they've been named as problems. He finds it cold, I think. He has never said that word to me, but I think it lives somewhere in his feeling about me. I love my son. He loves me. We are careful with each other. There is distance there too, a different kind, older. It was there before Vanessa, before Devon. It is the kind of distance that grows between a father and a son who simply look at the world through different glass, who would never have been close even without specific failures, who are connected by blood and affection, and something that is not quite ease. He came to visit last spring, stayed 3 days. We had good conversations. We went to dinner, the two of us, and talked about his work and a book he'd been reading and some political thing neither of us could resolve. And when he left, I stood at the elevator and watched him go, and I thought, as I often think, specifically at those departures, there is more to say, and we won't say it, and we both know that, and we have both decided that's all right. It is all right, or it is what it is, which is not all right, but has been accepted. I think about my father, Calvin. When I think about Nathan, I think about how Calvin showed love through provision, through work, through getting up every morning and doing the hard thing so that we had what we needed. It was not a verbal love. It was not demonstrative. It was embedded in action, in the way his work was embedded in other men's houses, invisible but structural. And I absorbed that. I became a man who shows love by building things, by protecting things, by making sure everything is where it should be when the people he loves need it to be there. Nathan wanted something different, something more like words, I think, more like presence. I was working so much when he was young, building the first company, building the second. I was providing. I was building the thing that became the villa and the penthouse, building it from the ground, and it required everything I had. Eleanor carried more of those years with the children than she should have had to. She never said so. She carried it, and she loved me, and she raised Nathan and Vanessa, and she made sure they knew I loved them even when I wasn't there. And God, the debt I owe her, for that is a number I can't calculate. But Nathan knew I wasn't there. Children always know. They forgive you more generously than you deserve when they're young, and then they grow up, and the forgiveness becomes more precise, more accurate, which is another kind of thing entirely. He forgave me generously. I am grateful for that. I wish I had not needed it. If I could go back. But this is an old man's game, going back, the most useless and irresistible game there is. If I could go back to Nathan at 10 years old, at 12, at 15, I would be in the room more. Not just in the house. In the room. There's a difference I didn't understand then, between being in the house and being in the room. Between being home and being present. Between providing the life and being in the life. My father made the same mistake. I inherited it the way you inherit a habit. You don't know is a habit until you can see it from far enough away. And by the time I could see it far enough away, Nathan was grown, and the years were fixed. I was better with Vanessa. Not fully better, but better. By the time Vanessa was young, I had more time. The companies were more established. I had learned something from watching Nathan grow up in the house without me properly in it. I was present more. I coached her soccer team for 2 seasons, which I was terrible at, which she found funny. I read to her. I was in the room. Maybe that's why what I did or didn't do with Devon sits heavier with Vanessa than it would with Nathan, because with Vanessa I had established, genuinely, the habit of presence. And then, in the most important moment, I was not present in the way that counted, the way that cost something. I was present in the other way, the protecting way, the managing from a distance way, the Calvin Elias Whitfield way. I sat here most of last night, this same chair. I do that sometimes, lose track of the difference between nights. The city below sounds the same at 2 in the morning as at 3, at 4, until it starts to change around 5, when you can hear the first sounds of the first people who have to be somewhere early, and the city begins to gather itself back into motion. I sometimes stay in this chair until I can hear that. There is something in it, something about continuity, the city going on, everything going on. I have had a good life. I want to say that plainly, because I spend so much of these nights with the weight of things, and it would be dishonest to let that be the whole picture. I have had a genuinely good life. I built things I'm proud of. I loved and was loved. I raised 2 children who are decent people, whole people, people with their own complexity and their own goodness. I had 31 years with Eleanor, which is 31 years more than a lot of men get with a woman like that. I have my health, more or less, the ordinary deterioration of an 83-year-old body that I cannot complain about, given the alternative. I have resources, and I have security, and I can sit on a boat named after my wife and feel sometimes something that is close to peace. And I have this particular thing with Vanessa and what I did not say. I have the marriage I let go on without full information. I have the 4 years I let pass. I have the phone call on the Tuesday when the October light was gold on the water, and she asked me directly, and I gave her the careful not lie. I am thinking tonight about whether to tell her, not again for the first time. I have thought about it many times, but tonight it is closer than usual, nearer, less theoretical. She's coming for Christmas, she and Robert, and she will be here in 11 days, and we will sit at the table I've had for 30 years, and we will eat and talk about everything except the thing we have been talking around for a decade. And at some point, she will leave, and I will stand at the elevator again. I don't know if I will tell her. I want to believe I will. I want to believe that at 83 years old, with the city below me and the full weight of what I know about time and what it does, I am finally capable of saying the thing that is true over the thing that is comfortable. I want to believe I am past the age where I protect myself more than I protect the people I love. I am not fully past it. I can feel that I am not. The fear of her face when I tell her is still real. The fear of what she will think, not of Devon. She has made her peace with what she knows of Devon, but of me. What she will think of the father who sat in a business centre and saved his assets and went back to the reception and danced with her and never said a word. What she will think of the Sunday phone calls for 4 years, careful and warm and completely partial. What she will think of the pause on the water when she asked me directly. That is the one I am least proud of. I can justify the wedding night. I can build a reasonable structure around the decision I made in the hallway about protecting her, about not destroying her wedding, about giving myself time to think. I can even build something around the 4 years, something about timing, about not wanting to damage an ongoing marriage. But the pause on the water, the 4-second choice, the careful not lie when she had already earned the truth and was asking for it plainly. That one I cannot build anything around. That one stands in the open. I should tell her. I know I should tell her. I have known for years. The knowing and the doing are different rooms in the same house, and I have been standing in the hallway between them for 11 years, which is its own kind of decision, whether I like it or not. My father used to say, and I don't know where he got this, some older man who had said it to him, probably the way these things travel from one old man to the next, passed like heirlooms through a specific kind of tired wisdom. He used to say a man always finds out what he's made of by what he can't put down. I have been carrying this since October of 1993, when Vanessa called me on a Tuesday and the light was gold on the water, and I chose the careful version. 11 years. She will be here in 11 days. I am 83 years old, and I do not know if I have the courage to do the thing I know I should do. I have built companies and protected assets and outmaneuvered men who tried to steal from me, and all of that required a kind of courage, the kind where the risk is material and the response is action. This is a different kind. This is the kind where the risk is being fully seen by your daughter, fully known, and finding out whether she can hold what she finds, whether there is room in her love for the full truth of her father, which includes the parts that are not admirable, which includes the pause, which includes 11 years of carrying something that was also hers. I think there is room. I think she is that kind of person. I think Eleanor made her that kind of person, and I helped make her that person too. The years I was in the room, the soccer practices, the reading, the being present when I learned how to be. I think there is room. The question is whether I am brave enough to find out. The city is very quiet now. That particular quiet that happens somewhere around 3:30, 4 in the morning, the deepest part of the night's silence before the first motions of morning begin. I can hear almost nothing. Occasionally a car, far off, not urgent. The building settling into itself the way old buildings do, small sounds in the walls. I am very tired. Not the tired of tonight, the usual tired, the tired that has been my companion for several years now, the kind that lives in the bones and does not fully leave even after sleep. This is bigger than that tonight. This is the tired of holding something for a long time, the specific muscle exhaustion of a thing you've been gripping that you haven't let go. I think about Eleanor on the water. I think about her in the years before she got sick, before we knew, in the years when we would sit on the boat together on evenings exactly like this, meaning exactly this quiet and this still, and she would say almost nothing, and I would say almost nothing, and it was the most comfortable silence I have ever known in my life. The silence of someone who knows you completely and has chosen to stay. The silence that is not absence but presence in its truest form. She would know what to do about Vanessa. She would have known the whole time. She would have And this is the thought that comes to me now, that I have had before, but not quite this clearly. She would have told Vanessa herself years ago. She would not have waited for me. She would have found the right moment and the right way, and she would have told her daughter what her daughter needed to know. And it would have been painful and complicated, and Vanessa would have cried, and it would have been real, properly real, and it would have healed in the way real things heal, rather than scabbing over the way a thing does when it's been covered rather than cleaned. Eleanor would have cleaned it. I covered it. 11 days. I'm going to try to sleep. I'm going to close my eyes in this chair for a while, the way I do now, and listen to the city settling, and think about what I want to say to my daughter when she gets here. Think about how to begin it. Think about whether the beginning even matters, or whether what matters is simply deciding that I will say it, and then saying it, the whole of it, and then sitting quietly in whatever follows, which is the thing I have been least good at my whole life, the sitting quietly in what follows. I have been a man who moves, a man who acts, anticipates, builds, and locks, and secures. The sitting still in the aftermath is harder for me than everything that preceded it. But I am 83, and she is 51, and she will be here in 11 days. And I am very tired of the weight of what I have been carrying. I am very tired.